to the Business Blueprint Podcast, where we take you on an exciting adventure through our triumphs and challenges and failures in creating and maintaining a thriving 6, 7, and 8-figure business. Get ready to dive into our strategies, decisions, and yes, even valuable lessons we've learned from our missteps. But that's not all. We'll also bring you industry-leading guests who will provide you with their priceless insights and wisdom. Stay tuned because the captivating journey of the Business Blueprint begins right now. Hi, I'm Charles Hatley, and this is the Business Blueprint, where each week we talk about things that are going on within our business that we think may interest you and may help you skip a few of the steps and mistakes that we have made. Today, I'm joined by Dan and Rebecca, and we want to talk about something that I spent all last week going over, and that was values-based leadership. And there was a lot packaged into what values-based leadership is, because first you have to decide, what are your values? How do you tie your values into your organization? And then what is leadership? So, Rebecca, I'm going to throw it to you first today. And when you were getting started in your organization, did you understand your values on day one, or was it more of an evolution of what your values were? And then a second part of the question would be, how did you come to those values?
Sure. So when I got started, I guess part of the drive was based on my own internal values. I felt like I had been in organizations that were not treating their clients in the way that I thought that they should be treated. They weren't informing their clients the way that I thought they should be informed. And some of them weren't treating their employees the way that I felt like employees should be treated as well. And so there was a lot of internal drive based around my own personal values and how I felt the practice of law should be done, how I felt that business should be conducted. And so that really was the driving force for me getting started. But when I got started, I didn't have to write them on a poster and, have everybody see them. It was just sort of like, this is what feels right. This is what feels good, for me in this business. Bringing on employees though, and trying to translate, this is what I'm all about. And then this is what that means, right? You can say that you're customer service focused. Does that mean that you bend over backwards on every complaint? Does that mean that you just refund everybody their money all the time? What is it? How does it actually impact what you're doing? How does it translate? And so we've had to spend a lot of time saying, well, this is what the value is, but then this is how it actually translates into your day-to-day life and how we can move clients' cases forward and how we can deliver good customer service is by following this kind of methodology and sticking close to those values.
Yeah, and you made an interesting point, because I'm reminded of this story when Neiman Marcus first opened in Alaska. There was a lady that came in the store with a tire, and she goes, "I bought this tire here, and I want my money back." And it's Neiman Marcus; they don't sell tires. And the store just opened, but Neiman Marcus's values was to be fanatically customer service oriented. So the employee took the tire, asked the lady how much she paid for it, and gave her that money back and took the tire back. That might be a value gone awry.
Mm-hmm.
So my question for you, Dan, is when you're thinking about values, how do you ensure that the values don't go awry and end up with some illogical conclusion like Neiman Marcus now having a tire and stuff?
It's tough because sometimes you can go to the extreme because you think of, all right, I have these values and I need to enforce them. And so in order to enforce them, I'm just going to go above and beyond. And that necessarily isn't always the case. And I'm not saying you don't want to go above and beyond, but you have to be more focused on what are those values. So once you know what they are and you can define them and you can explain them in a manner that others can understand, then it'll start to make sense as far as what is the best approach to do. Because Rebecca was talking about the client side, which is so important. And then we have the employee side on the values leadership, because leadership doesn't just mean employees that you're managing or leading. It's also the client side of it too. And once we know what our values are, then we can look at each situation and apply the values to them. Where would it fit within the way that the company or the firm is thinking? And what value could we associate that with? Because sometimes you're going to have hard decisions. And on the client side, a hard decision may be a client may feel that they've been wronged or that something happened that didn't go and have the best outcome, or an employee wasn't that responsive, whatever the case may be. In the client's mind, that had a material effect on their case or their service. And so they're asking for 100% refund, which we're not going to remain in business if we continue to do that. And so the tough decision is going to be making a decision that is informed on the values by listening to the client. And to me, it all is about empathy and listening and showing that you care, and then walking the client through, okay, this is the procedure, this is the process, this is what happened. And maybe there was a breakdown, and owning it and saying, we can do better, and this is how we're going to do better. And maybe there is a refund that is issued, or some type of a credit, or maybe a product that's offered for a lower rate. But it doesn't always mean that the client is right. We just want to listen to what the client's concerns are, because the concerns are right. That's how the client feels. And we can't dismiss or discount what that is. But for where I sit, the toughest thing for me is always, okay, I know the client has a concern because that's how they feel. And so I'm not saying your feeling is wrong. It's just, how do I make that right, in the sense of it, hopefully you're understanding where we're coming from, or maybe there wasn't that egregious of an error or an error at all, but I need to kind of walk you through. And that's part of the values too. When I was talking about listening and empathy, it's understanding what is the concern and how can I explain what course needs to happen or what happens, so the client can fully, hopefully, understand what that situation is. And then we can come to a meeting of the minds as far as, is there a credit issued? And if not, this is why. But at the end of the day, we really want to try to salvage the relationship with the client. And sometimes we have to make those hard decisions that we didn't do anything wrong, or I hear what you're saying, but it didn't have an effect on your case, or this is not at all what happened. And I'm sorry, but we're not going to issue a credit. And we just have to hold firm. And sometimes we may lose a client over that, but in the big picture, the company is going to be well off, because you're establishing precedence on how you hold your values.
Yes. And, the values are so important. And you said something that I really liked, which is listening with empathy. Our customers, our clients, the people who avail themselves of our services are not always going to know how to speak to us in our vernacular, right? In any industry, we start, turning in on each other a little bit, and we start using vernacular that is germane to our organization. And sometimes a customer or client will not be able to speak to us in a way that we understand, because we're being obtuse and we're saying, well, what are you talking about? But it's important to say, okay, what are you trying to say to me? Is what you're trying to say to me and what you're trying to relate to me in your own vernacular, which is not right, wrong, or indifferent. It's just different. It was our mission and what we did for you within line with our values. And if it wasn't, then we need to take ownership of that. Ownership is one of our values, right? Take ownership of the things that you do and move forward for the benefit of the client. Now, you could probably tell by my remark on the Neiman Marcus, I don't necessarily agree that your value should go so far afield that if you're in a high-end clothing industry in Alaska, that you should start taking tires back because there used to be a tire store there. That doesn't make sense. But it may be in line with the values that person now comes back and says, well, I love this store. And I never would have thought about buying an expensive jacket versus a utilitarian jacket. And now I'm going to be a customer for life. So, Rebecca, when you talked about the formation of your values, you talked about your past experience. And I kind of want to dig in a little bit there with you because, even in sitting in this meeting, you're the only female, you're younger. And so your past experiences within the legal industry would have been different than my past experience in legal industries. So how did those, and I don't want to say you were treated wrongly or things like that, but how you were treated, how you were perceived on day one of being an attorney, help form the values that you now hold very close to you within this work?
Sure. It's hard to distinguish exactly like what was the moment that this became really important for you, right? But just overall, my experience was very much that attorneys seemed to steer their clients towards settlement, not because it was what was best for the client, but because it was most convenient for the attorney. And that was just my overarching experience was we don't really go to court. We kind of, if we have to, we will, but by and large, we don't. And it is true that something like 95% of cases settle before going to trial. Sure. But our whole experience has shown that you have a better likelihood of reaching a good settlement if you're ready to walk in for that trial. When you're, opening the doors to walk into the courtroom with all of your exhibit binders and everything ready for your presentation of evidence, that's when the other side's going to say, yeah, okay, I'll take that deal. So you have to get to that point in order to reach that. And so I felt like overall, a lot of the attorneys that I saw and worked with were just kind of like, you don't really need to go to court. We can just probably settle this. And it was because they didn't feel like putting in that legwork. They didn't feel like putting together all the exhibits and putting their case together and getting to that point. They wanted to just kind of take the easy way out right now. So
So let me
that
dig in
was
a little bit deeper with
okay.
you. So
Hmm.
not focus on how we treat the clients. Part
Hmm.
of our value system is very simple. Like, we are your partner,
Hmm.
but our values are how we treat the people within our organization.
Right.
So how was the way that you were treated by other organizations help dictate the way that you wanted to treat the people that now work with you in your organization?
Sure. So having some autonomy definitely was important to me. And I had one position where essentially it was, you have to be in this chair from this time to this time. And it doesn't matter how efficient you are at doing your work. It doesn't matter if there's opportunities to like go to court and shadow or maybe do some advanced learning through the bar association or anything else like that that could have much more developed me
Mhm.
as a young attorney at the time. It was you sit in the chair from this time to this time. Okay, well, I'll sit here then. And I did not want any other attorneys to have that same experience or that same feeling where I just wasn't getting to learn. I wasn't getting the opportunity to go and actually do what I wanted to do, which was litigate.
Mhm.
And so with our attorneys, we give them a lot of flexibility in terms of how they, come on board. And everybody comes with different experience, but if they can go shadow for a bit, if they can do some projects with some of the more senior attorneys, if they can, get involved in a case that's in a slightly different area, something they haven't experienced yet, we want them to have all of that. And we really focus on mentorship and development for our attorneys. So we have, MH University, where we sit down every week and talk about what's going on. And we just have kind of an open forum. We have an internal listserv where people can ask questions of each other. And so, coming from a situation where it was you sit in the chair in your office and you don't talk to anybody and you just, churn out work, that doesn't create a long-term situation. It didn't for me, and I don't think a lot of people would want that
Mhm.
either.
Yeah, you brought up growth, having people go and they educate. And one of my personal values is growth. I don't think a lot of people would look at me on a day-to-day basis when I'm wearing, I've got my long hair down and I'm wearing shorts and a t-shirt and flip-flops and say, hey, that's a guy who probably reads, 2 or 3 books, 4 books a month on personal development, on just things I'm interested in. But growth is one of my values. So Dan, one of my questions for you is, you're coming into an organization. Not very many organizations wear their values on their sleeves. Even if they have values, it may not be prominently displayed. How do
Mhm.
you ensure that your personal values, before you start working with an organization, how do you ensure that your personal values align with the values of that organization?
That's tough in the beginning because when you're looking for a job, at least in my experience, and especially early in my career, because I was only with a couple firms, but I just remember interviewing and I didn't even think of values, right? Until I really got into a firm to where it resonated. Okay, what are the values and how can we apply it? But my advice to others who are interviewing, make sure that you ask, what are the values of the company or the firm? Because if they truly have values, right, and they believe in them, they're going to be excited to share them with you. And your questions are a great one because I'm thinking in the interviews that I've conducted or even just been a part of, no one has asked, what are your firm's values? Not one. And so I would be caught off guard in a positive way, but and pleasantly surprised. But I think that's a question that to me would show someone's really not only doing their due diligence, but they want to make sure that they're a good fit for the company. And it's easy to iron out too
Mhm.
if you're the interviewee, maybe I'm just not a fit for this company because of their values. Not saying that their values are wrong or just not going in the best direction, but it's just maybe something that I believe in may not be a good fit for the company. So why continue on in this process and then be part of the company and realize, oh my gosh, what did I do? Or the company think, ooh, this wasn't a really good hire based on our values. So I always try to weave it into questions when I'm doing interviews. But I think just to go back to your question, for those who are listening, you absolutely, as part of your due diligence, when you're looking at the size of the company, where they're located, the type of law that they practice, or the type of service that they offer, depending upon what you're looking for. Also look at what are their values too, and then challenge them in a way of, how do you apply this to the employees? How do you apply this to the clients? And just fruitful conversations can come from that. So I think that's an important question that needs to be asked by, if not the interviewer, definitely by the interviewee.
Values, I think it's something that we learn over time, right? We know that there are certain things about ourselves, but we may not clearly call them values. It may not be, my value is growth, my value is accountability or sincerity or presence. I may not have I may not have given enough thought to put those into single words, succinct statements. One of my values has always been like, if I see something going on, I'll probably just jump in and do it. Right. I worked at a place and I was always the first person there every morning. So I went and I emptied the dishwasher. And this was when I was in management. I went, empty the dishwasher. I'd clean the coffee maker. I'd get the coffee maker ready for the day. And I remember a higher level manager was there and had shown up earlier and saw me just kind of walking through my normal morning routine. It kind of became a routine. And the manager looked at me and said, "Why are you doing that? It's not your job." And I was like, "It doesn't hurt me." And they told me to stop. And I think that was the first time in my career that I was like, wow, this organization's values don't align with mine at all. Like, this is weird to me. So Dan, I kind of want to stick with you on this question. What do you do when you realize that an organization's values don't align with yours?
You have to look within, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's tough, because you have to acknowledge, if it's not a good fit, acknowledge it ahead of time. And when you're thinking about, as you're talking with the employer, talk to others who are part of that company too. Because even if you're in the interview and it's going great and the values are lining up with yours, everyone's putting their best foot forward. It's almost kind of like, I think of interviews like a first date. You're putting your best foot forward, right? You want to show off everything. But if to kind of peek behind the scenes, talk to the employees that work there, just like you would talk to someone's friends before you get into a serious relationship with them or take that next step. You want to talk who's worked there. Look at some of the reviews. Now, those can be a little bit biased and sometimes they're not employees working there, but it's just another tool that is available that you should do your own due diligence. And maybe the values as you're talking don't fit, but there might be an opportunity that they can align as you talk to others and really find out what are the values and what is the mission of this company. And it may work out. But at the end of the day, if it's not going to be a good fit, it's always better to make that decision ahead of time and not down the road, because then you're not only doing a disservice to yourself, but you're also, in my opinion, preventing yourself from growing. And you mentioned it earlier, kind of personal growth or developmental growth. You're setting yourself behind. And a lot of the books and the podcasts that I listen to really speak with, when you're talking about growth, whether it's personal or professional, it all starts looking at yourself in the mirror and identifying who you are, what is your goals, what do you want to do, what are your values, and try to align them with where you want to be, whether it's in a relationship or in employment. And not that they always have to be symbiotic together, but they can definitely run parallel and work together. But if they don't, then you just have to admit to yourself, this isn't going to work out. And then you move on. And I mean, that's just one of those tough decisions that we were talking about earlier. But this is more on the personal level of either declining an offer or declining an interview based upon values. Or on our side, the employment side, maybe we don't extend that offer to someone because based upon questions that they've answered for us, whether oral or written, or how many interviews that they've gone on and spoken with other colleagues of ours, it may not be a good fit based upon our own internal values.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can talk about values all day long because I think it's so interesting to say, like, hey, these are the things about me that aren't going to change. But I want to thank both y'all for talking about values today. And next time we're going to talk about how to take the values of the organization, combine those with your personal values, and become a value-based leader. So thank you for joining us on the Business Blueprint. We always enjoy the feedback we get from the viewers, so please subscribe. And we look forward to talking to you about values-based leadership next time.
Hi, this is Dan Cuneo with the Business Blueprint. Thank you for taking time to listen to this week's podcast. Please join us next week for part 2.
Thanks for tuning in. If you found this insightful and entertaining, be sure to hit subscribe below. and join us on social media to get more insight into what we are going through each and every day.